Okay, the next thing you need to do is to calculate the intrinsic value of the business that you're looking to invest in. This is the most important part of this course. Similar to the PEG ratio, the intrinsic value will significantly help you assess the current market value of the business stock. Thereby, you can determine when the stock is undervalued or when it's overvalued. And that information is definitely useful to you for making your investment decisions. In very simple terms, you can understand that the intrinsic value is simply a true value or a real value of the business. So if the real value of a stock is less than the current price that the stock is selling at, this means that the stock is overvalued or expensive. In the case that the real value of the stock is greater than its current market price, this means that the stock is undervalued or it's cheap to buy. So our criterion is that you should only buy the stock when its intrinsic value is greater than the current market price. Let me give you an example so you can understand clearly how the intrinsic value indicator works. Assume that you're considering to buy a particular stock. For example, this business currently has 1 billion shares outstanding. When looking into the cash flow statement, you find that the business has a free cash flow of $325 million. The analysts predict that the business will grow by 12% every year. So, the question is, if this business stock is currently selling at $28.65 a share, should you make the investment? Before answering this question, we'll need to calculate the intrinsic value or the true value of the business. If the intrinsic value per share is greater than the current share price, this means that the stock is undervalued or it's selling at a price which is cheaper than its true value. Therefore, we'll make an investment. In the case where the intrinsic value is lower than the current share price, we will not consider buying this stock. In order to calculate the intrinsic value, there are several steps that we'll need to follow. Firstly, we'll need to calculate discounted free cash flows of the business over the next 10 years. And then, we'll put all of the discounted free cash flows together so we can come up with a present value of the 10-year discounted free cash flow. After that, we'll calculate the intrinsic value per share by taking the present value and dividing it by the total number of shares outstanding. And finally, we'll compare the intrinsic value per share with the current share price to make our investment decision. Okay, let's begin with the first step, which is calculating the discounted free cash flow. First of all, we'll need to calculate the projected free cash flows. As we've known that the company will potentially grow by 12% every year, so by using the long-term growth rate, we can project the free cash flows of the business in the next 10 years. We can use this formula, or just take the current free cash flow and multiply it by 1 plus the long-term growth rate of 12%. We'll have the projected free cash flow of the first year. In the first year, the free cash flow will grow by 12%, from $325 million to $364 million. And in the second year, it will keep growing by 12%. So we'll simply take the first year's free cash flow and again multiply it by 1 plus 12%. We'll have the projected free cash flow of the second year. And then we'll keep doing this for calculating the projected free cash flows of the following years. The next thing that we'll need to calculate is the discount factor. We'll use the discount rate of 6% and use this formula to calculate the discount factor. Discount factor equals 1 over 1 plus discount rate to the nth degree. N here is the number of years. In order to calculate the discount factor for the first year, we simply use the formula and replace n by 1. We'll have the discount factor equal to 1 divided by 1 plus the discount rate of 6%, so we'll have 0.943. We'll use the same formula to calculate the discount factors for all of the following years. We just need to replace n by 2 for calculating the discount factor of the second year, and replace n by 3 for calculating the discount factor of the third year, and so on. After having the projected free cash flow and the discount factor, we'll calculate the discounted free cash flow of the business by multiplying the projected free cash flow and the discount factor together. 364 times 0.943 equals 343.4. This is the discounted free cash flow of the first year. 407.68 times 0.89 will have the discounted free cash flow of the second year equal to 362.83. For the third year, we'll do the same. 456.6 times 0.84 will have 383.37. We'll keep doing this to calculate the discounted free cash flows of the next 7 years. Okay, our next step is to calculate the present value of the 10-year discounted free cash flow. We simply sum all the discounted free cash flows together, so we'll have the present value of $4,455. This is the anticipated present value of the business after 10 years, based on the assumption that the business will keep growing by 12% every year. The next thing that we'll need to calculate is the discounted perpetuity value, which is often known as the terminal value of the business. We'll use the following formula to estimate the present value of perpetuity value of the stock in our example. Perpetuity value equals the final year's projected free cash flow times 1 plus perpetuity growth rate, divided by discount rate minus the perpetuity growth rate. In our example, the final year's projected free cash flow is the year 10 free cash flow. We'll use the projected free cash flow of year 10, not the discounted free cash flow, because we'll calculate the discounted value later. In order to estimate the terminal value, we'll not use the long-term growth rate of 12%, but instead, we'll look for another growth rate, which is called the perpetuity growth rate. In this case, we'll consider using the average GDP growth rate of 3% as the perpetuity growth rate. The reason for using the GDP growth rate is because, even though the stock that you're looking to invest in may potentially grow by 12% every year, there's no guarantee that it will keep growing by 12% forever. Logically, a business probably won't be able to keep growing faster than the economy forever. So, we'll assume that over the long term, this business can grow at the same pace of the economy. Now that we have the final year's projected free cash flow of $1,009.40, the perpetuity growth rate of 3%, and the discount rate of 6%, we just need to follow the formula to estimate the present value of perpetuity value of the stock in question. So, we'll have the present value of about $34,656. Because we use the undiscounted free cash flow to calculate, we'll need to multiply this figure with the discount rate of year 10 to calculate the discounted perpetuity value of this business. In this case, we'll have the terminal value of $19,338. Our next step is to put the present value of the 10-year discounted free cash flow and the terminal value together. We'll have the intrinsic value of $23,793. After having the intrinsic value, we simply divide it by the total number of shares outstanding. We'll have the intrinsic value per share of the business. The business currently has 1 billion shares outstanding, so we simply take the 23,793 and divide it by 1,000. We'll have the intrinsic value per share equal to $23.80. So now it's time for us to make our investment decision based on the result that we've calculated. The business stock is currently selling at $28.65 a share, while its intrinsic value per share is only $23.80. When the intrinsic value is less than the market value of the stock, this means that the stock is overvalued, or it's expensive. As you can see, the real value of the stock is only about $24, but it's selling at more than $28. The stock is quite expensive now, so we will not consider buying this stock. And another thing that I want to tell you is that every investor often comes up with a different number of the intrinsic value. That's simply because they use different numbers and different methods to calculate the intrinsic value. And this does not mean that their intrinsic value is incorrect. Calculating the value of stock tends to rely on assumptions, and every investor has a different view about the stock that they're investing in. For example, in some cases, the analysts predict that the stock will grow by 12% every year, but some investors are conservative, so they may use a growth rate of less than 12%, for example, 10% or something. And eventually, that will lead to a different result of the intrinsic value. By being conservative and following some essential stock picking criteria, you can easily make a better investment decision. Thereby, you can make a profit from your investments.